On July 25, 1996, there was a gathering at the home of Charles and Kathy Register and their two sons, Jeff and Nick, in Durham, North Carolina. Among others were Dale Brisson, Brent Runyon, Henry Jones, Stephen Pemberton, and Warren Jewett.
Once upon a time, there was a problem. When I was a child in the 1930s, when we bled and didn't clot, we didn't know why. It was a great mystery.
Leeches, snake venom, bone marrow, ovaries, lung tissue, placental, brain, and liver extract were all treatments for hemophilia. Whole blood became popular.
I was a guinea pig for many of those supposed cures of the time. With the whole blood, we didn't realize then that if it was more than 8 hours old, the clotting factor had disappeared and it was essentially useless.
The two major types of hemophilia are factor VIII deficient, also known as type A, or classical hemophilia, and factor IX deficient, also known as type B, or Christmas disease.
In 1939, they were studying sunspots and the lunar cycles as a potential cause.
Christmas disease was named after a young boy named Christmas who showed symptoms of hemophilia.
I have classical hemophilia.
December 1952 issue of the British Medical Journal published an article by Drs. Rosemary Biggs and Robert McFarlane of Oxford, England, on Christmas disease.
Egg whites, beef plasma, tea bags, peanuts, cobwebs, and mother's milk.
Fresh frozen plasma became a treatment right after World War II.
There are numerous blood clotting factors. In many cases, the absence of one or more of them results in a bleeding condition.
The Babylonian Talmud recognized the hereditary pattern of loose blood that will not coagulate in the religious rite of circumcision.
I don't have in my blood what you have in your blood.
Not all of these clotting deficiencies are considered hemophilia, although they're similar in many respects.
There's a number of other clotting factors.
The blood coagulation cascade, or the waterfall hypothesis, describes how the blood clotting factors work to stop a bleed.
Factor IX deficiency is next in line after factor VIII in popularity of the hemophilias.
It was first described in 1962 in two separate laboratories, one headed by Dr. Robert McFarlane of England, the other by Dr. Oscar Ratnoff of the United States.
Hemophilia actually means love of blood.
In the 1960s, Dr. Judith Poole at Stanford University found that she could make a factor VIII concentrate from fresh frozen plasma by the process of cryoprecipitation.
Queen Victoria passed the hemophilic gene to Leopold and two daughters who became carriers and passed it on. Hence came the term royal disease. She had given birth to 9 children.
Hemophilia is inherited through the mother on the X chromosome.
Sickle cell is another story. I have hemophilia.
It occurs in 1 in 7,500 live male births worldwide, regardless of race, religion, or nationality.
I'm lacking a factor VIII.
Before the Russian Revolution, Rasputin, the mad monk, was thought to have helped Prince Alexis, an heir to the royal disease, with his bouts of bleeding through hypnosis.
Just because it's not in your family now doesn't mean that it can't show up later. Fully 30% of all newly diagnosed cases of hemophilia are the result of a spontaneous mutation. It just happens.
Wine was another early treatment for bleeding disorders.
Wine doesn't do it for me. An occasional beer, maybe.
Someone say beer?
Beer, wine, no, hemophilia isn't that much fun.
Buy me beer.
Ballon Rouge, a glass of red wine.
When a knee or hip joint bleeds, the joint space fills with blood.
Pain, and then successive hemorrhaging into the joints causes crippling.
I've had a knee replacement.
I have hemophilia A, classical hemophilia.
When I have an elbow bleed, I get swelling, pain, and lack of range of motion.
Many times young emergency room physicians have never even seen hemophilia except in a textbook that they read several years before until we come limping in. Actually, many times I've had to tell them how to treat hemophilia myself.
When I was a teenager, just as the concentrates were becoming available, I developed an inhibitor, which is a natural antibody to factor VIII.
Plasma cryoprecipitate, concentrated antihemophilic factor.
Been there, done all of that.
My inhibitor didn't make me bleed more, but made my bleeds more prolonged and more severe. That's why my joints are trashed now.
Antihemophilic factor is a blood plasma protein that is absent in people with classical hemophilia. Webster's Dictionary attributes the term to a 1947 paper by Dr. Kenneth Brinkhouse and colleagues at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Antihemophilic factor was renamed factor VIII in 1959.
When I have a cut, just give me a Band-Aid. It's the internal stuff, the internal bleeding in the joints. That's the real problem.
I don't bleed fast, I just bleed longer.
There are bleeds into muscles and into soft tissue, into the neck, and most serious of all, into the head.
My inhibitor made the treatment not work for me. The treatments that were there were only used in life-threatening situations, and only then they didn't work very well.
Factor VIII comes from the liver, mine comes from the factor.
I've always used antihemophilic factor concentrates.
Throughout history, head injuries have been the leading cause of death for people with hemophilia.
My brother had hemophilia and an inhibitor. In 1973, he had a massive internal hemorrhage and died about a week before I was to get married.
I have one brother. He does not have hemophilia.
My wife is very healthy. She is not a carrier. I have two very healthy sons.
I have severe Christmas disease and a new baby daughter who's a carrier. There's a lot of good work being done, and someday soon there's going to be a cure. I also am blessed with two healthy sons, my lovely wife.
When I was 8, I fell off my bike and hit my head on my father's birthday. A week later, he found me in a coma in my bedroom, stiff as a board. He actually carried me down the stairs as if I were an ironing board. They took me to the hospital, gave me this.
Wine mellows with age.
I am.
In the early days, most people with hemophilia never lived to see adulthood.
I spent weeks, sometimes months, confined to bed or in the hospital. But even so, it was a rich and rewarding childhood, and I'm still here.
Concentrated factor has really improved the quality of life for children. It's given them back their childhoods.
In 1967, when it was produced, it was a whole new world.
Is it?
And then it bit us.
Branson is 3.5 years old now, and I infused him about 6 months ago for the first time.
The first person in the colonies known to have hemophilia was John Oliver, who emigrated from Bristol, England to Newbury, Massachusetts in 1639.
Home infusion benefits the person with bleeding disorder because he or she can treat early and often, preventing the horrible long-term effects of internal hemorrhage.
Mary Oliver, born in 1640, may be the first carrier born in the colonies.
Hemophilia dates back into the early 1800s in our family.
My first self-infusion was at the age of 10 at hemophilia camp. I practiced the next 2 years at a local hospital and started home infusion at the age of 12.
Dr. John Conrad Otto, in 1803, published an account of a hemorrhagic disposition existing in certain families. Otto noted that the lay term for this condition was bleeders.
Hemorrhagic disposition doesn't sound very pleasant, but it is descriptive.
Bleeders. No wonder they had a hemorrhagic disposition.
The term hemophilia was first used by Dr. J.L. Schonlein in 1823 as a general description for all bleeding disorders, and in 1828 by Dr. Friedrich Hopf in the title of a publication, after which time it was used for just the inherited disorder.
But they didn't know why it happened.
In 1947, as a result of the research of Dr. Kenneth Brinkhouse in coagulation, The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill became known as the Athens of hemostasis and thrombosis.
Synthesized clotting factor is derived through the DNA recombinant technology.
In 1987, Dr. Gilbert White II of Chapel Hill treated George McCoy with recombinant factor VIII. This was the first recorded treatment with a recombinant protein in a human.
Recombinant factor VIII is a glycoprotein synthesized from genetically engineered Chinese hamster ovary cell lining.
Human source clotting factor is produced from pooled lots of human plasma into which up to 20,000 donors have contributed.
In the late 70s and the early 80s, there was a problem in the blood.
There was a problem.
There are problems.
There's a big problem.
Since 1985, both donors have been screened and processes have been used to sterilize or purify the finished clotting factor.
When the blood supply became cleaner in the late 80s and early 90s, I felt that it was safe to try to overcome my inhibitor by taking large volumes of factor VIII. I took a large volume twice a day for almost a year, and it went away.
We are the canaries in the coal mine. We are the early warning system of America's blood supply.
Well over 3,000 persons with bleeding disorders in America have died of AIDS.
Hemophilia does not necessarily mean AIDS.
Not all hemophiliacs were infected with HIV. A few were not, but all of us were affected.
Our blood brothers are dying.
Of the people I know with hemophilia, I can think of only 4 who were not infected. I'd say about 90% of those that I know were infected.
At this point in Branson's life, he doesn't really know what hemophilia is. He can participate in any activity that other kids do at his age.
My name is Matthew Branson Spate.
This infusion is given on a regular basis and is called prophylaxis, which means he's treated before a definite need arises.
I am 21 years old.
It also benefits members of the family because we no longer have to make those midnight trips to the hospital.
He plays basketball, baseball, and loves to swim.
I infuse whenever I have a bleed, approximately every 7 to 10 days. It's pretty expensive stuff. Whether it's synthetic or from human plasma, it's over $1 a unit. I use 1,000 units per injection. That's $1,000 a pop for me.
I was able to get rid of my inhibitor, and now I can infuse myself prophylactically 2 or 3 times a week with 2,000 units of recombinant factor.
I infused 2,000 units weekly.
Inhibitors are still a problem, a big problem in the hemophilia community.
The greatest hope of the hemophilia community lies in gene therapy, the greatest hope.
Will there be evolutionary advance toward a cure or planned obsolescence, dependent on the marketplace?
Once there was a problem.
I have hemophilia and AIDS. I was medically infected with HIV because of the contamination of the blood supply.